There's a sacred trust between a protector and the protected. It's a silent promise that you are safe from the dangers of the world. But what happens when that promise is broken? What happens when the person meant to be your shield becomes the threat you were warned about? Today, we look at two cases of young girls, an ocean apart, whose disappearances led to a truth that was, in its own way, utterly unthinkable. The story begins not with a person, but with a place. Mount Holly Plantation in Berkeley County, South Carolina, is a sprawling 6,000-acre world of dense woods and dark swampland. Here, isolation was absolute. With no close neighbors or passing traffic, it was a place where sounds were swallowed by the trees and a person could vanish without a trace. This landscape didn't just shield a family from the outside world, it shielded a predator from consequence. This was the isolated home of the Malinoski family, and in late 1987, it became the site of a quiet tragedy. On the night of November 21, 1987, Korrina Malinoski, a 26-year-old mother, vanished. Her husband, Stephen Malinoski, was the plantation's caretaker. He told police a story they later called flimsy. He claimed that after an argument, Korrina simply left for a drive around 11 p.m. He never reported her missing. It wasn't until Korrina's boss at a local convenience store realized she hadn't shown up for her shift that the alarm was finally raised. Police searched the vast property but found nothing. Korrina was gone. When Korrina vanished, she didn't just leave behind a suspicious husband. She left behind her 11-year-old daughter, Annette Sagers. For the next 11 months, Annette remained on that isolated plantation, now solely in the care of her stepfather, Stephen. An unsettling quiet fell over the property, a silence that would be broken by a second, even more alarming disappearance. At around 7 a.m., a school bus driver saw 11-year-old Annette Sagers waiting at her bus stop at the entrance to the plantation. He continued his route and circled back, a trip that took no more than 20 minutes. When he returned, the stop was empty. Annette was gone. Annette couldn't have walked far in that short time without the driver seeing her. She had either been picked up or she had gone back to her family's cabin a short distance away. Her stepfather reported her missing that afternoon. Once again, law enforcement descended on the 6,000 acres, and once again, the search was fruitless. Two disappearances from the same remote spot, almost exactly a year apart. The connection was undeniable and terrifying. In the aftermath of Annette's disappearance, a single stunning clue emerged. Stephen Malinoski told police he found a handwritten note on a sheet of notebook paper. It was penned in a child's hand and addressed to him. The note read, "Dad, Mom came back. Give the boys lots of kisses and hugs, and also you too. Love, Annette." At first, it seemed to explain everything. Korrina hadn't been a victim of foul play. She had simply returned to reclaim her daughter. Handwriting experts confirmed the writing was Annette's, but this only deepened the mystery. Was she writing freely, or was she being forced? Investigators were deeply suspicious of Stephen. They knew of his history of violence and the turmoil in his marriage. Why, upon finding a note suggesting his long-lost wife was alive, did he not frantically contact her family? The note, however, achieved its purpose. It created a non-criminal narrative, a runaway story that was nearly impossible for police to disprove. With no bodies and no crime scene, the investigation stalled. A potential double homicide case turned into the cold case of a mother and daughter who had, according to the only physical evidence, chosen to leave. But Stephen Malinoski's actions following the disappearances paint a much darker picture. His account of Korrina's vanishing was always considered weak, but it was his behavior after Annette went missing that defied explanation. In 1988, the same year his 11-year-old stepdaughter vanished, Stephen relinquished his parental rights to his two biological sons, Thomas and James. He allowed them to be placed into the foster care system. He didn't turn to family for help. He severed ties with his own children. Soon after, he moved to Florida, remarried, and started a new life, effectively erasing his past in South Carolina. These are not the actions of a man searching for his missing wife and stepdaughter. They are the actions of a man running from something. Though he has never been charged, Stephen Malinoski remains the primary person of interest. The most plausible theory is as chilling as it is tragic. It suggests that Stephen murdered Korrina and buried her body somewhere on the vast plantation. 11 months later, perhaps because Annette knew something, he murdered her too. In a final twisted act of manipulation, he may have forced his stepdaughter to write the note that would serve as his alibi, using a child's love for her mother to conceal an unspeakable crime. Today, the case remains cold. No arrests have ever been made, and no remains have ever been found. For Korrina's family, this lack of resolution is a unique form of torture. There is no final resting place, only the unending grief over a life stolen and a void that can never be filled. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has released age-progressed images of what Annette might look like today, a woman now in her late 40s. These images are a heartbreaking reminder of a silence that has lasted for over 3 decades. Where one case was defined by a calculated, chilling silence, our next story exploded into a public spectacle of lies, greed, and breathtaking deception. On February 19, 2008, in the working-class community of Dewsbury, West Yorkshire, 9-year-old Shannon Matthews disappeared after a school swimming trip. She was last seen near her school, just a half-mile, 0.8 kilometers walk from her home. At 6:48 p.m., her mother, Karen Matthews, called the police, her voice frantic as she reported her daughter missing.
Police emergency. I want to put my daughter is missing, please. Right, how old is she? 9. 9? Yeah. When did you last see her? She went to school this morning. Right, have there been any arguments or... No, not at all. No.
At the center of the subsequent storm was Karen. She gave tearful television interviews, pleading for the return of her beautiful princess daughter. She became the national symbol of a mother's anguish, rallying a town and touching a nation.
If anybody's got my daughter, my beautiful princess daughter, please bring her home safe.
This public performance was amplified by a media landscape that, some argued, revealed an ugly double standard. Just a year earlier, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, the daughter of affluent doctors, dominated international headlines. In contrast, Shannon, from a working-class council estate, received a fraction of the attention. It created a perception that some victims and some families were simply deemed more worthy of sympathy than others. The response from the community, however, was immense. The West Yorkshire Police launched one of the largest investigations in its history, second only to the hunt for the Yorkshire Ripper. Over 250 officers searched 3,000 houses and questioned 1,500 motorists. This official effort was matched by the residents themselves. Led by Karen's determined friend Julie Bushby, they refused to stand by idly, organizing their own search parties that combed the area day and night in freezing conditions. For weeks, in the absence of answers, public speculation ran rampant. The most prominent and terrifying theory was a random abduction, that a predator had snatched Shannon as she walked home. Police, however, considered every angle. They investigated whether she had fallen and become trapped, or if she had been specifically targeted by someone with a grudge against the family. Inevitably, suspicion also began to fall on those closest to Shannon. Attention particularly focused on Karen's partner, Craig Meehan, after a disturbing discovery on his computer led to his arrest on separate charges midway through the search. To a horrified public, it seemed like a sinister and plausible explanation for her disappearance. But behind the scenes, while suspicion pointed elsewhere, small cracks were appearing in Karen's own story. Neighbors noticed she seemed oddly detached, at one point smiling during a march for Shannon. These were the first signs that her grief was just a performance. The motive for this cruel charade was money. A newspaper had offered a reward for Shannon's safe return, a fund that quickly grew to £50,000. This reward, meant to help find her, was actually the reason she was gone. For 24 agonizing days, the community searched. Then, a police tip led them to a flat less than a mile, 1.6 kilometers, from Shannon's home. It belonged to Michael Donovan, the uncle of Karen's boyfriend. When Donovan didn't answer the door, officers smashed their way in. There, hidden inside the base of a bed, they found Shannon. she was alive. As he was being arrested, Donovan uttered the words that exposed the entire conspiracy. "Get Karen down here. We've got a plan." The community's joy at Shannon's discovery quickly turned to disbelief and then to fury. The woman they had cried with was not a victim, but in fact, the architect of the crime. The trial of Korrina Matthews and Michael Donovan laid bare the sordid details. The kidnapping had been staged to claim the £50,000 reward. The plan was for Donovan to find Shannon, take her to a police station, and claim the prize money, which he and Karen would then split. The evidence was horrifying. The court heard that Shannon had been drugged with sedatives to keep her quiet and compliant during her captivity. She had been kept tethered inside the flat with a strap that had a noose on the end. Korrina Matthews took the stand and tried to blame Donovan and her boyfriend, but the prosecution called her out for telling lie after lie after lie. On December 4th, 2008, both Matthews and Donovan were found guilty of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and perverting the course of justice. They were each sentenced to 8 years in prison. The community they had deceived felt a profound sense of betrayal and public humiliation. The case was used by some in the media to reinforce negative stereotypes about working-class families, branding an entire community for the actions of one person. To protect her from her mother's infamy, the state granted Shannon lifelong anonymity. She was given a new identity and a new life with a foster family. The Shannon Matthews the world knew was erased for her own salvation. A serious case review later concluded that while social services had a history with the family for low-level neglect, the bizarre and criminal plot could not have been foreseen. The stories of Annette Sagers and Shannon Matthews show how the sacred trust between a guardian and a child can be twisted into something monstrous. One lie was a quiet whisper, designed to create a silence that has endured for decades and allowed a killer to potentially walk free. The other was a loud, greedy performance that manipulated an entire community for money. Both cases began with the unthinkable absence of a child, and both ended with the even more unthinkable truth about those who were supposed to protect them. Thanks for joining us. For more in-depth cases from FactFaction every week, please subscribe and enable notifications. We'll see you in the next one.